Good morning. I think we can start. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are joining us from. And welcome to the Sanitation Data Systems 2's webinar series. We at Dev-Afrique Development Advisors are super excited to launch this webinar series, which will spotlight water and sanitation data systems tools that are used across Africa and South Asia. And this is in a bid to foster shared learning and spotlighting some best practices. Today's webinar spotlights the NWASCO Information System, a water and sanitation data system used by the National Water and Supply Sanitation Council, NWASCO, who's a regulator in Zambia. My name is 𝐿𝐿𝐿 𝐒𝐞𝐫𝐬𝐭, a senior consultant at Dev-Afrique, and I'm super excited to be your moderator for this particular session. Once again, I would like to reiterate the fact that we are super thrilled to have you join us as we explore the innovative approaches that different actors and some of our colleagues and best practices within the water and sanitation data management sector. And for this particular webinar, focusing on Zambia. Our agenda is going to cover the items beaming on the screen. So we'll just have a brief background around why we are where we are, the presentation from NWASCO, and then we'll have a question and answer session, and then we'll hear a few next steps, and then we'll close. But before we continue, I would like to cover a few housekeeping rules for our webinar just to ensure a smooth and engaging session. Firstly, please ensure that you have your mic muted during the presentation to avoid any background noise, as that may disturb the flow and the attention span of other participants. And then we will have a dedicated question and answer session at the end of the presentation. So if you have any questions that come to mind as the presentation is going on, feel free to drop them in the chat as a way of, keeping them there. My colleague Barakat, who's on the call, is going to help us go through those questions. And for those that will be comfortable enough to just raise their hand and read out their own questions, we will have that opportunity during that Q&A session. And then if you experience any technical issues as pertaining to the webinar, please feel free to also include that in the chat. Barakat, who's my colleague, will be on standby to assist you. And as you may already be aware, this webinar series is being recorded, and the recording will be made available to all registered participants after the session, just so that you could recap and go back to any points that you may miss. And we also shared resources. That's the NWASCO Learning Series note, which I hope everyone had access to, but we will send a follow-up email that will have that included and today's presentation. Once again, we are super excited and we thank you for your participation. So we at Dev-Afrique are implementing a sanitation data system strengthening project in sub-Saharan Africa. And this is in a bid to improve data systems for effective decision-making and performance management and service delivery of the municipals and utilities at all levels. And our core activities are revolving around 5 main areas. The first one being improving the understanding of data systems best practices from non-WASH sectors. And one of the examples would be like the health sector. What are some of the best practices in data systems from the health sector that we could incorporate within the WASH ecosystem in a bid for us to build and strengthen our data systems. And so at Dev-Afrique, we're doing a landscape of these best practices, and we'll share a little bit more in the coming webinar series and in email follow-ups. The second activity area is to improve understanding of the current state of non-sewage sanitation data systems within municipals and utilities across sub-Saharan Africa. And what we're doing is just having conversations with multiple utilities, municipals, and other key actors, just to get a sense of what the non-sewage sanitation data systems look like. And we will have, again, subsequent announcements with regards to outputs from that work stream. And the third one is we are working with our partners, SOAS and Athena, to develop a WASH data systems maturity index and deploy it to actors, just to get a sense of, if you're thinking of how mature your data system is, what are the parameters that you should think about. And it covers the ecosystem, the entire ecosystem, both at org level and ecosystem wide. And then we have a fourth bucket, which is landscape and developing an inventory of WASH tools in South Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa. And these tools will facilitate shared learnings and best practices. And then we'll eventually provide technical support and facilitate cross-learning and support utilities and municipals. Today's particular webinar series is tied to the activity bucket around tools mapping, where the team has put together, has been mapping different tools within the ecosystems that are used by actors. This is still an ongoing activity, and these tools will be spotlighted for the facilitation of shared learnings and best practices, as noted. And as mentioned, we'll host a webinar series to spotlight these tools within Sub-Saharan Africa, and the goal is to promote shared learning, best practices, and enhance the use of sanitation data systems for performance management and service delivery. And also this webinar will target stakeholders within Africa and other continents, including regulators, utilities, and municipal authorities. And it will provide the opportunity for you, the critical stakeholders, to share your best practices in order to help you improve the work that you are doing. And then each webinar series will be supplemented by learning materials, as you have already noticed with this NWASCO first series, where we had a learning note. And we'll hear a little bit more about the upcoming webinars and some next steps towards the end of the webinar. So for this particular webinar, which I'm super excited about, being the first in this series, focuses on the NWASCO Information System. And we hope that at the end of it all, you will gain insights from how data experts at NWASCO are using this innovative platform to monitor sanitation service delivery and performance management in Zambia. And we hope that this is one of the first layers to helping you network within the sector. So just before I introduce the speaker for today, is that the NWASCO Information System is a web-based system that the regulator in Zambia uses to monitor the performance of commercial utilities. And this has helped the regulator to really look at issues around performance, setting tariffs, and advising government on water and sanitation issues. And so feel free to scan these QR codes if you haven't had access to the information note that we had earlier shared. So I will leave this on the screen for the next 2 seconds, and then I will dive right into introducing our speaker for today, who I am super excited about. Thank you. So our presenter today is none other than Chola Mbilema, who is a senior inspector in financial and commercial management at the National Water Supply and Sanitation Council of Zambia, who has 18 years of work experience within the sector and has held multiple positions, and has been a key driver in ensuring that key actors are embracing citywide inclusive sanitation throughout the sector. And so allow me at this point in time to welcome our presenter Chola. And Chola, I'll just allow you to say hi and a few remarks before we jump into your presentation. Chola, over. Chola, you're muted.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Good afternoon for those that are in the afternoon. My name is Chola, as introduced, and I will be taking you through the NWASCO Information System. So I look forward to have an interaction with yourselves. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Chola. And I will be sharing a presentation on my end, and Chola will walk us through. So Chola, over to you.
Thank you so much. So before I start my presentation, I just want to mention that I have a colleague of mine. His name is James Kasongo. Maybe I will ask James at this point to just turn on his video and introduce himself, because we will co-present this particular presentation. So James, just say hi to the participants.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is James Kasongo, as has been mentioned, equally from NWASCO, Financial and Commercial Management Inspector. Looking forward to also presenting to you all and sharing my thoughts on the NWASCO Information System. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. So we're ready to go now. I will take you through the NWASCO Information System. As already mentioned, this is a system that we use at NWASCO, and it's a system that basically aids our regulation. Now, I just want to indicate before I even dive into the presentation that the issue of information management is very critical for both a regulator and a service provider. In particular for regulators, information is what defines our work. So if we don't have information as regulators, then basically we cannot undertake our tasks. So it is paramount for every regulator to have an information system that they are in control of and they are able to use to basically collect data from the regulated entities, analyze it, and also use it for reporting purposes. So we can get into the slides now. All right, so my presentation layout will be basically the objectives of the NWASCO Information System, the improvements that have been made so far to the systems, the user administration, data verification, the system navigation, and also the conclusion. So on the system navigation, I will show you some screenshots of what the system looks like and how one can navigate through. But we'll also have a live demo, which James will take us through of the actual system. So we'll basically log into the system and just show you how it works very briefly. All right, so the objectives of the information system that we have, of course, like I had mentioned in my introduction, for the regulator to work, you need data, because you need data to indicate how the sector is performing. You need data to actually influence decisions as a regulator. You need data to actually influence financing into the sector. So most regulators actually realize the fact that data is a requirement. And so in the beginning, for example, in our case as NWASCO, we were mindful of the fact that we needed data. And so we used to collect this data manually. And we had all these stacks and stacks of papers for information that we were collecting from our regulated entities. And so now to try and make our processes more efficient and effective, we had to come up with a system that would replace those manual reporting processes into the electronic systems. And so we had to have law that would back up that process. And I've cited there what enables us to actually deal with issues of reporting. So there was a statutory instrument that was passed, statutory instrument number 63 of 2000. This basically provides for us to report on performance of the utilities, and therefore that needed us to come up with a robust system that would help us to do that. So what I'm trying to say on this slide is that information management has to be backed by law as well, because there are all these other issues. I'm sure in other countries you have them as well. Issues of privacy, issues of data security. So you cannot just wake up and say you are coming up with a system. You need legal backing for you to actually come up with any particular system. Can go to the next slide. All right, so this is how our NWASCO information system evolved. I must mention that NWASCO started operating in the year 2000, and from 2000 up to about 2003, we were utilizing, mainly it was paper-based reporting, and then we tried to transition to Excel, simple Excel sheets that we were sending to the regulated, and then they would populate them and send them back to ourselves. And by the year 2004, we started with the development of the NIS, which is the short of the NWASCO Information System. Now, through our journey, we had various versions that we were developing of the NWASCO Information System. The initial version was an Excel-based version, which was developed, like I indicated, sometime in 2004. And we kept improving on that one until around 2015, when we now embarked on a process of developing a web-based system. So we were learning along the way. With the Excel-based system, some of the issues that we were confronted with was that data was not real time. So we had to wait until the regulated entities fill in the data, and then they send back those systems to ourselves, the Excel sheets. And also we found that issues of data integrity were a challenge with the version that we had earlier. That's the Excel version. But the issues of traceability as well, because when you have to send a system to the regulated and then they send it back, sometimes you end up with so many versions of the same information. So they'll tell you, oh no, we sent you a wrong version, we'll send you the correct version, and so on and so forth. So we had to embark on this process of developing a web-based system. And by 2017, we deployed our first NWASCO Information System, Volume 5, which was a web-based system. And that's the system that we're currently using now. And I must hasten to mention that it is still, when you do information systems, there's no arriving. So it is still work in progress in terms of improvements. We are always improving on it to see how we can do things even more efficiently, how we can include more information in the system, and so on and so forth. Next slide. Okay, so in terms of the system itself, when you log into the system, basically that is how it looks like. The system itself has got two interfaces. There's an interface for the regulated entities, where basically we have the users there, that are able to, they have permission to enter into the system. They are administrators of the system. So they have rights. They have a couple of things that they can do in there. Then we have on the other side, our side interface, where inspectors are also able to do a couple of things in the system. So the system is built on MS Access files, and like I indicated, we have a CU version. CU is basically meaning the utilities or the regulated entities, and once they input the information, they're able to export it, and we automatically are able to see that. Then we have the NWASCO interface of the system, where we're able to see the information, and basically the ones that are given rights to look at that are the inspectors, the various inspectors that have the responsibility to verify the data. And then once the data is verified, we can be able to basically accept the information. So what happens is that immediately the data is inputted by the utility, the file is imported from our end, and then the data is available for us to look at, and this is all happening in real time. At the moment, we submit data annually, so the utilities send in their annual reports. But I think going forward, I think starting from even next year, we want to shorten this period, because I think it's posing a bit of a challenge to monitor progress because of the length of time. So we will be opening it up to monthly as well as quarterly reporting. We already have those functions. Then the system, like I mentioned, is web-based. It has data querying and extraction functions. We are able to automatically generate charts and tables to just look at how the trends are looking like. And then the whole process of data verification, unlike what we had in the past, in this particular system, it has actually been improved. What I mean is that the system has got inbuilt checks. So for example, if you enter maybe population figures, and then the system calculates an indicator like coverage, and then you happen to enter more people than what can actually be covered, then the system will automatically refuse to admit such information. So we have accuracy checks that are automatically inbuilt for some things. And then we can export the data into various formats. So you could take it to Excel, you could take it to PDF and all other versions, even Word documents, for purposes of manipulating. If you want to, play around with the data and produce your reports, you are able to export it in the various formats. So basically, that's what we're able to do in the system. Next slide. Could we go to the next slide, please? Can I have the next slide? Okay, so let me just now get into the data verification process. So when the data is being captured, the process starts from the service provider itself. The understanding should be that the service provider should have a process where they are actually collecting the data and validating it along the way. So it starts from the departments that generate the data. So we have different departments. We have the technical departments, we have commercial departments, financial. So each of those departments will actually gather their data, they will review it and be able to ascertain that this data is actually accurate as they enter it into the system. And then we have the management team to review the information in the system. And then from there, the last point where the information gets to is the managing director of the utility company that verifies the data. So in terms of who should actually submit the data in the system, it's the managing director, and that was done for a purpose, that the managing director should have sight of the information that the utility is actually submitting. So no one else in the utility is allowed to submit the data. So that function is an exclusive function of the head of that particular institution. Then from there, after those internal processes, the information is submitted to NWASCO, and within NWASCO, we have inspectors like myself that have different backgrounds. But also what I need to mention is that within NWASCO, we have desk officers. So each of us inspectors have been assigned particular utilities to look at. And these, you are basically a desk officer for that particular utility. So when the information comes through, the desk officer actually is the first person to look at that information and makes sure that there are no abnormal trends. We basically just do a quick review of the information to validate obvious things, like if there are jumps, if there are like, unexplainable drops and so on and so forth. We actually look at those as desk officers and be able to confirm that this information from the outlook looks correct. Then from there, the information gets to, the NWASCO as a team. So at that point, we hold a retreat as an inspectorate department. This is where we now have the charts and tables generated to help us comprehend the trends that are happening. So then we will be able to analyze the information as a team and come up with a story more or less to tell about what is happening with each of the utilities in particular, but also with the sector in general. So we do all that analysis as a team, and this is where now the individual expertise is required. So like I mentioned, within the inspectorate department, we have people of different backgrounds. We have financial people, we have economists, we have technical people, engineers, we have people that have done environmental management and so on. So we put our expertise together and analyze the information to be able to actually come up with what is going on in the sector. And then the final stage now is where we are saying if there are any outliers that we cannot explain. Remember, we are the people that are constantly in touch with these utilities. We are the ones that do monitoring of their provision of services. So we basically have an idea of what's going on even before they submit this information. And by the way, information is always submitted by 30th January of the previous year. So the previous year's information is submitted by 30th January of the following year. So if there are outliers, we send the information back to the utility and we generate a written query to say there's this query, so we are sending it back for you to recheck this and that. If there's no outliers or unexplained trends, then the information is accepted into the NWASCO Information System, and the charts and tables that are generated are then used to now begin to put the story together. Next slide. Okay, next. So in terms of the system navigation, like I said, I will just run through some screenshots of what the system actually shows. So there you can see that it's showing Eastern Water and Sewerage Company, and we have some parameters. So the system will always show you the previous year and the current year, so that you are able to show a comparison or a trend. And we have different parameters. We have indicators that range from operational, financial, staff efficiency, service levels, and corporate governance indicators. And lately, we also included an aspect of rural water and also the private operators in the system. But those particular aspects are yet to be populated, but this is something that we are getting into. You might be aware that in Zambia now, the utilities have been mandated to also oversee service provision in the rural areas. So that is why we added the rural areas. Next slide. So that's basically what I was talking about. When you enter the system, you will see yourself as the user, the person that's in the system. And I needed to mention that the system actually has audit trails. So we're able to tell who changed what or who was submitting the data. It's easy to trace information like that. But once the information is admitted from our end, the utility cannot change it. Not even ourselves, we cannot change it. That is why we have to go through that thorough verification of the information to make sure that it is information that is reflecting what's on the ground. And once it is admitted into the system, then it cannot be changed by anybody. So when you look at now the issue of the system configuration, we have those functions. We have the home page, we have the master configuration, and in the master configuration, you have a number of things. So this is basically a function that most of the utility has, where they create their service areas and the populations in those service areas. This is basically when you are preparing the system. It's important to have that because a service provision keeps on growing. They are extending to other areas. So when they have a new area that has come on board, they can create that service area within the system. They state the population that is in that area, and then it will be available for them to report on how they are progressing. The next tab is on the data submission. Maybe we can move to the next slide. So data submission, like I indicated, I got screenshots that were showing 2017 and 2018. Basically, it always shows you the previous year, and then you have your current year where you have to enter your data. So the reason is that you need to be looking at how the movement is between the previous year and the current year. So you submit your data for the current year, and it keeps storing all this data that you are inputting in the system. Next slide. All right, so now when you get into the system from our end as a regulator, this is basically what you see. So you see the reporting period. For example, on top there, you will see the annual reporting period is showing you 2018, requested date and submission deadline, and also the status of the report. So we always set up that part for the utilities, and when they enter the system, they know when the submission date for the next report is, you know, the request for the reports. We will open the system early enough for them to start entering the data. So when they submit the data, what we see basically are those tabs. So there's the general data where we just get general information about the utility itself. Then we have the different performance indicator categories. Like I had mentioned earlier, we have the service areas. So in there, we have all the service areas that the utility actually covers. And this is where now they enter their populations, and this is where issues of the type of services that they are able to give. Is it household? Is it kiosks? And the numbers of people that each is able to serve, and so on and so forth. So in the service areas is where basically issues of coverage are actually generated, because they will define each area, each residential area, how many people are there, how many people they are serving, and if it's a public water point, how many are there, how many people is it able to serve, and so on and so forth. Then we also have the financial data. Basically, this is financial information and basically reflecting how the financial performance of the utility is. We have the technical data. This is where we get things like NRW, we get the issues of what sort of treatment facilities they have, the network size, and so on. Then the commercial data basically looks at issues of billing and collection for the services that the service provider is providing. And then we have also the personnel data. So how many people do they have? What qualifications do those people have? And also the gender issues come into that particular tab. And like I had indicated, we've now included the rural water section as well. So when you see on the action button there, you could actually view information for each of those, or you could update the information. So if the information is not yet admitted officially in the system, you could actually update it. When you view, you can actually update. But once it is submitted and it's accepted on our end, then the action on the action button, the issue of updating disappears. So you cannot update anymore. You can just view the information. So that is how the system is set up. Next slide. Okay, so that is now inside the system. I picked on the technical data for water. We have both water and sanitation in the system, and those are separated to be able to track what is going on in each of those. So I'm just showing on the screenshot there some technical data. Like I indicated, this is where we have issues of volumes of water produced, what is treated, you know, and all this actually comes into compute the indicators such as, you know, production losses, NRW, and things like that. One other thing I must mention is that in the system, information is only entered in the white shaded columns. The ones that are in blue are basically calculated indicators. These are key performance indicators that are calculated. So the utility cannot enter that. They only enter the primary data. So basically all the secondary data is actually calculated by the system itself. So that calculate the key performance indicators. The ones that are in the dark shade of gray, those are basically totals. So for each particular category, you get your totals. So those are indicated in a dark gray shade, and they are also calculated by the system. So the focus for data collection is actually just primary data. Next slide. Okay, so in terms of visualization, we have now these indicators in the various categories that I indicated: financial, operational indicators, cost analysis, service level. So this is how we have categorized our indicators. Under each category, you get a number of KPIs that we are able to report on. So when we are visualizing, the data will come out in those categories, and then we are able to generate charts and tables of the various indicators that fall under each of those KPI categories. Next. So that's just an example of the cost analysis indicators. So you see that under that, like I indicated, under each category, there are a number of KPIs. So under cost analysis indicators, one of the KPIs that is there is operational cost. So when you look at operational cost, the system will be able to visualize, and there will also be a table of the actual figures, but it will show also a chart of that particular indicator. So there we are showing operational cost. We also have personnel cost. So there are a couple of indicators that fall under that cost analysis indicator category, and those are visualized in the system automatically. So you are able to see how the utility has done from the previous year to the current year. Next. Okay, so after we've done all our processes, verifications, and you know, we generate our charts and tables, I had indicated earlier that we now need to sit and tell the story based on what we are seeing from the analysis that we conduct. So all that information ends up in what we call the urban and peri-urban water supply and sanitation sector report. So this is a report that now harbors all the information, all the work that goes into the verification, the analysis, and also now to tell the story around how the sector is performing in general, but also how each utility is performing. We compiled it into this report, and this is the report that we use to actually disseminate to the public. And it's officially submitted to Parliament, because we have a mandate to report to Parliament through the ministry that is responsible for water. So from this report now, there are discussions that are generated at various levels of governance. So starting from Parliament itself, once the report is admitted there are committees that delve into it. And as a regulator, we are now called upon to explain some of the issues that are in the report, but also the utilities are also, summoned to go and explain some of the trends that are shown in the report. So basically, this is how we conclude our information, collection, verification, and also this is a report that now, sparks conversation around investments, around decisions to be made with regards to issues of policy, of governance, of regulation, and so on and so forth. Next slide. Okay, now in the recent past, we noticed that there's been a gap actually, because us as a regulator, we do have the NWASCO Information System that we use to, collect our data, analyze it, and report it. But at the ministry level, we needed to have something that is high level, that collects information, and it's integrated and also multi-sectoral. Remember that NWASCO just deals with water supply and sanitation, but if we are looking at the water sector in general, then you cannot avoid speaking about issues of water resource. There's issues of environmental protection and so on and so forth. So we embarked on a process together with our mother ministry to support them with developing what we are calling an integrated management information system, which is basically going to integrate the various systems that are dealing with wash data. So the NWASCO Information System, for example, the system that the Water Resources Management and Development subsector is using also to be integrated, so that at ministerial level, they are able to see high-level data. And when I say high-level data, this is data that goes into now what informing the commitments that the government has made. For example, the SDGs, the vision that the government has, the Vision 2030. So the parameters that they've put in there at that high level, they need a system that will then, inform them of how we are doing with regards to those commitments that they've made. So that is where now the 𝐿𝐼𝐸, as we call it, comes in. Next slide. Yeah, so I'll not go through this very, very critically. I just want to indicate that, of course, I've given the reason why we embarked on this process to support the ministry. I must hasten to say that this is still work in progress, and the purpose is just that we should have traceability of data, we should have data integrity, we should make reporting easy for our decision makers, for our politicians, and we want to have a one-stop shop basically for all information that we are generating in the water and sanitation sector, which includes the water resource, water supply, and all other auxiliary sectors. Next slide. Next. Okay, so these are the objectives of the basically we want the ministry to have up-to-date data. There should be data traceability, accuracy, issues of effective communication, and also to just have a secure storage of data. So you agree with me that sometimes, in these sectors, in our countries, you will find that we have multiple partners that are coming in to support us, and each partner will be doing their own things. And in most cases, you find those partners have a way of keeping their information. And once their projects are done, that information will end up nowhere. So we want to keep track also of what everyone else is doing. We want to also use that to inform decision making. Where should the interest be put, and so on and so forth. So basically, that is why the 𝐿𝐼𝐸 Act is. Next slide. Okay. So it just shows how data will be flowing. I already mentioned this, that from the different subsectors, data will flow into the entire. The ministry's role is not to collect data, but to just receive data from the various stakeholders like regulators who have that primary role of ensuring that. So the ministry should not involve themselves with collecting data, because in most cases you find that ministries outside their mandate to verify information. They're supposed to, so information should be fed to them by institutions that can actually verify that information, and then they're able to make the decisions that will help to make the next. Next slide. Okay, yeah, so this I think I've already explained. These are the sectors that will feed into the integrated information system, and information will basically be collected and generated from institutions that are under each of those sectors. The ministry will just be a recipient. So this system is primarily an integrated one. So issues of data verification and so on are not part of this system. Next. Okay, you can move to the next. Next slide, please. Okay, seems the slide is stuck on my end. At this point, I think the emails was just there to indicate that we are trying to now move into a higher level of the system that will actually collect all the information that's being collected by the different regulators and sectors. So at this point, maybe let me allow James to get into the NWASCO information system and basically just try to show us how the system looks like when you log in. So James, maybe you can come in, and thank you very much for listening.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. I will now go ahead to present the NWASCO Information System, which is basically a web-based system. What we're trying to do now is to basically bring to life the screenshots that we're able to observe during the previous presentation. So if I can be allowed to go ahead by the facilitator, I will share my my screen so that all can be able to view the information system.
Yes, you could go ahead, James.
Thank you. Are you able to view my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So what I would do is we'll focus more on the NWASCO side of the information system. I remember the previous presentation, there are two sides of this information system, which is shortened for NIS. So the NIS has got the side where the commercial utility makes a submission, and it also has a side where NWASCO now receives that submission and verifies and gives feedback to the commercial utility. So the port that I'm opening is in relation to the NWASCO side of the NWASCO information system. So like I mentioned, it's web-based. So when you click on to the link, this is what you're faced with as the initial step towards logging in. So here you can then push in your username. If you recall, the previous speaker was talking about the concept of desk officer, which in this case are the inspectors of NWASCO. So each inspector has login credentials, and I'll be pushing in mine. Of course, you push in your password and then you log in. So having logged in, what you are able to see is the home screen, which is basically just what we're seeing in front of us. From the home screen, we have these tabs on the left-hand side. Some of them have been collapsed. So if I expand, for example, the master configuration, we are basically talking about the indicators which we have defined as a regulator on cost coverage, collection efficiency. So those have been embedded in the system and are linked also to our benchmarking process, which we report on in the urban and peri-urban sector report. From there, we have the data submission request. So we are currently collecting data annually. At the end of each year, what we do is we create data requests for the next year, which we then send to our service providers to input data. So that is done from here. So you can see we have annual information from 2019, 2020, 2021, 2023, which was recently reported, and soon we'll be opening the request for 2024. Now, once that information request has been sent to the commercial utilities or the service providers, and they conclude their inputs on their part, they then submit that information back to us as NWASCO to review and give feedback. So once that process has been done and the commercial utility has submitted information, we are then able to view it from here, the approved data. So this tab gives us now an opportunity to review the information which they've submitted, undertake verification exercises, part of which is done from the retreat that was mentioned earlier, and of course also with reference to annual inspections that we undertake on these commercial utilities. So we have 11 licensed commercial utilities in the country at the moment, and one of them is Nkana Water, which I'll be able to open just for illustration purpose. So this was information which was submitted for the year 2023, has been reviewed, and we have already reported. So for us to view, I simply go on the view button and proceed. So what we're able to view when you open the commercial utilities information, first and foremost is of course the name of the commercial utility, the year, who submitted the information, who reviewed, and who approved. So just from face value, you can see that we've tried to embed some internal controls in the NWASCO information system. One of them being that the submission has to be approved or reviewed by the commercial utilities chief executive officer, or the MD. So we have to see that that has been done. And on our end, it has to be approved by an inspector. In this case, Engineer 𝐏𝐿𝐿, who is one of our inspectors, is the one who approved this submission, because he's the desk officer for the commercial utility. Okay, so if you recall again in the previous presentation, the aspect of review and then retaining the submission in case there are errors was talked about. So this part here of the NWASCO Information System allows us to retain a report after a review has been done, and then you can put in your comments there. Perhaps no adequate data as an example, and then you submit. Once you submit, it's sent back to the service provider for them to look at those comments and correct them. Once that is done, they're then submitted back to us as NWASCO to proceed with the verification exercise. So those are some of the internal controls that were highlighted in the previous um, presentation. We're simply bringing them to life here by looking at the actual system itself. Having gone through that, we can then appreciate other components of the submission in terms of the specifics. So we have general information, we have service areas, we have financial information, we have technical information, we have commercial information, we have the personnel information and rural components. So all these components are summarized at some point to create our benchmarking system, which we now report in the annual sector report. So I will not go through all these slides, I think due to time, but it's important that we just appreciate that this is what we look at in terms of data. It's comprehensive and allows us to assess the commercial activities performance across all its operations, be it technical or financial. But data capturing or systems have to be improved continuously. Therefore, a year or two from now, this can either be expanded or beefed up a bit more to ensure that we remain we have adequate information from the commercial activities. So, for example, I can open maybe just for that purpose again, I can go to commercial data and open it, considering that the presentation had technical information. So under commercial, we are looking at water services. Again, it's broken down into various information requirements that have to be inputted by the service provider. Again, these, if you are setting up one information system, you would have to contextualize them to what exactly it is that you want to see as a regulator and what the impact of that information would be if you do not have it. So in our case, for example, we're looking at the service coverage for water and for sanitation. We're trying to appreciate the billing volumes and relate this to how much water is being wasted. We're looking at the liquidity aspects also of the commercial activity, so the billing money component, and also the collections, the metering, and also customer care aspects are also covered through complaint handling. So that's basically one of the tabs that we'll look at in terms of information requirements. Apart from the approved data, we can then also visualize the information, which is also again categorized under those tabs. The same information that we're looking at under financial and commercial. Now, in this case, they are calculated by the system using primary data, and then the information now is summarized under these components here. Okay, again, they are broken down across all respective indicators. For example, if we go to service level, of course, the institution is a commercial utility. We can still go to the same kind of water. We can go to the year 2023, which is the most recent, again, 2023. Maybe for comparison purpose, we can put 2022 there, then we can generate the information. Okay, precious. So once that is generated, the system now summarizes all that information in the background that we're looking at into the respective benchmarks. So water quality, for example, it gives you a grade. So it's now easier for us to compare performance against sector benchmark because it has summarized the results for us. Okay, so this is water quality aspects, hours of supply. It also calculates using the information. It generates the summary, and this is what we get here. Again, we then compare this with sector benchmarks and also see previous performance to see if the service provider is improving. So this is basically what would summarize the information we're looking at. So the user admin, of course, is just for you to push in the password. We have the help desk, and then we have the logout tab. So basically, I think for now we can end here. Of course, we will need a bit more time to really hear in the specifics, but this gives us a general overview of what the system is all about and supplements the PowerPoint presentation which was made there previously. Thank you.
Mute me.
Yeah.
Thank you, James, and thank you, Chola, for the amazing presentation. A lot of lessons coming out from that, having your data systems embedded and supported by a legal framework at a national level, having, verification and data checks, and tying the whole system to a national IMS. Super, super exciting. I think I don't want to take up a lot of time talking. I think this has been a really, really exciting presentation. So what we will do is we will take a short 5-minute break for everyone to grab water, coffee, stretch a little bit. And then when we come back, I will open the floor to questions. I know people are, itching to ask questions. So after the 5-minute break that we will have, it would then be open for questions. So let's be back here in 5 minutes. I hope we all enjoyed that short break just to stretch and refresh. We'll come back to this webinar series on the NWASCO Information System. We are going to dive right into the Q&A session after that exciting presentation that involved, the slides and the demonstration of what that platform looks like and what it actually does. And so what we will do is we will start with questions from anyone that has a question that, should feel free to raise your hand. Just feel free to raise your hand and then I will unmute and call upon you to ask your question. And then after that, my colleague Barakat will read through any questions that have been posted in the chat. And so I have seen there a couple of hands and we could start with Kabir. Kabir, the floor is yours.
All right, thank you so much, Shuku. Chola mentioned in our presentation about how well they have evolved in the past decades on the information system. So particularly, I'm curious on, as you know, that youth are key drivers in this evolution. So I'm curious how you have been engaging the youth, and particularly what you have set aside as plans in achieving this transformation that are set aside with young people in Africa, basically. I don't know if that is gotten.
Thank you, Kabir. So through the process of evolution of the data system, how are young people engaged? Correct, Kabir?
Yes.
Perfect. So we'll take the three questions and then I'll allow Chola and James to respond. The next question is from Engineer Yusuf. Engineer Yusuf, please feel free to unmute.
Okay. Hello. Thank you, Shukur. My question goes
Engineer Yusuf, I'm not able to get you on my end. If you are speaking.
to show the service provider. Can you hear me?
Yes, we
Hello?
can now hear you. Yep.
You can now hear me. Okay. So my question goes to the to Shola. I want to ask, what's the NWASCO scenario like in terms of day-to-day monitoring of data and the data inputs as well? Is it more of the role from the regulator side or the service provider? Thank you. Shola, were you able to get that?
Thank you, Engineer Yusuf. So the question is what the day-to-day monitoring of that data looks like and who that is for. Is it on the regulator's end or the service provider's end, correct?
Very correct. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Shukla.
Perfect. Thank you, Engineer Yusuf. I will take one more question, and I've seen Adefemi has a hand. So Adefemi, I will come to you. We'll have Theophile ask the question, and then we'll go to the presenters for them to respond, and then the first person that will ask the question after that is Adefemi. So Theophile, the floor is yours. The question. Theophile, if you are speaking, you're muted. Okay, as Theophile is sorting out the microphone, Adefemi, we can take your question and then we. Oh, okay, there we go. There we go. Okay. Yeah, the floor is yours, Theophile.
First, I want to congratulate the presenters for the nice presentation. I would like also to, my question is basically based on the type of data which is collected to the system, especially for sanitation services. Is it, we managed to see for the water sector, water supply, but for sanitation, I would like also to know what kind of data did the system collect, and for which KPIs which it collect and analyze for improvement of sanitation services in our areas.
Thank you, Theophile. So those are the three questions for now, and then we'll come to Defemi. So Chola and James, the questions are, one is how are you engaging young people through this digital transformation that NWASCO has undertaken? And then Engineer Yusuf had a question around what the day-to-day monitoring looks like and who that, role is, like who's responsible for that. Is it the service provider or is it the regulator? And then the question from Theophile around what kind of sanitation data the system collects and what are those KPIs. So over to you, James and Chola.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So, of course, we'll pick the questions as they were given, starting with Kabu, whose question is to do with the involvement of the young during this evolution in terms of the digital space. So let me start first and foremost by mentioning that as NWASCO, we involve the youth not only in the aspect of digital, but we've also developed mechanisms of encouraging the youth, particularly the girl child, because our sector in Zambia is more it's male dominated. So apart from just the youth, but also the issue of bringing the girl child in this space, not only in terms of digital, but also sanitation and the sector as a whole. So with regards to specific aspects such as the needs, we in the past have sponsored some graduates to undertake research works on activities to do with the water sector, amongst them being the possibility of, or rather how we can improve the digital space, be it in implementing different mechanisms of regulation, or also aspects of information capturing or data capturing or verification. So to this effect, we have a specific department or office that helps to coordinate this, which we call the resource center. So the resource center actually coordinates with different young ones, be it at high school level or undergraduate level, cross-cutting, basically, if we can put it that way. So as NWASCO, we have those initiatives that we put in place to try and bring on board the youth, increase the number in the sector, but also give them specific tasks that at times include aspects of data capturing, which then link to the NWASCO information system. The next question was from Yusuf, who was talking about who does the day-to-day monitoring. So in our sector, we have a clear institutional framework, and that framework defines the role of each player. So we have the mother ministry, the Ministry of Water, Development and Sanitation. At that ministry, we have the regulator, which is ourselves as NWASCO, who then license the service providers to provide the service. So at ministry level, their role is mostly policy and resource mobilization. As a regulator, the act is clear. Ours is to monitor and enforce the provisions of the Water Supply and Sanitation Act. And we've got different mechanisms that we go about monitoring and enforcing. The commercial entities or the service providers are then responsible for the day-to-day operations of their companies, which is the provision of water supply and sanitation. Of course, they can also have inbuilt if we can call them lines of defense, to just monitor within themselves how they're operating. But the general mandate in terms of the monitoring is with us as NWASCO through the concept of regulation. This can be done, of course, on-site, where we go for inspections, or off-site, where we request for monthly reports or weekly reports or quarterly reports, depending on how we want that information to be submitted to us. And then that information now helps to support the NWASCO Information System. 𝐞𝐜 brought out the key aspects of sanitation services. Of course, we may have focused the presentation on the water, but also it's also key to highlight the sanitation service bit. So in terms of the key performance indicators or the information that we collect on sanitation, it's both for SWORD and on-site sanitation. So in the part of SWORD, we are trying to appreciate the number of connections and also how many people, the population coverage basically for the SWORD. On the on-site sanitation, we have the aspect of the fecal storage management bit. So we capture information to do with the number of septic tanks, how many of those septic tanks were serviced. We also capture information with regards to pit latrines, which are then can be broken down in traditional and non-traditional. So those aspects are also captured in our NWASCO information system. The overall indicator that we're looking at in terms of sanitation is basically the service coverage. In this case, for us, service coverage comprises of the SWORD and the non-SWORD on the on-site, which for now we are only getting the septic tank to include as part of coverage. Reason being, like I mentioned earlier, we are just entering into the space of sanitation in terms of fecal storage management, and therefore we're still trying to capture information. So for now, on the on-site sanitation, we are confident with the septic tank information we have captured, and therefore feel confident to include that as part of service sanitation coverage. But the pit latrines and all other forms of on-site sanitation, we are yet to collect as adequate information on that to comprehensively understand and also put that as part of our sanitation coverage. So for now, on the part of sanitation, the overall indicator is sanitation service coverage. In terms of information, it's both the SWORD and the non-SWORD broken down like I've explained. Thank you very much. I hope I've adequately addressed those questions.
Thank you, James. Any comments from you and Chola before I go to Adefemi? Okay.
Sorry. So we are having another meeting with our ministry. So Chola has just quickly stepped out, but she'll be joining us, I'm sure, before the end of this one.
Thanks, James. Adefemi, the floor is yours. You can ask your question.
Thank you very much. Very, very good presentation from our brothers and sisters in NWASCO. Well, as a service provider, I'm curious to know what are the challenges that you have in regulating the sanitation sector of Zambia, and what are the lessons learned from your experience from the over 10 decades of your transformation from to digital data monitoring and, of course, monitoring and evaluation. I'm also interested in knowing about your M&E, monitoring and evaluation. What does your data transform into? I'm curious. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Adefemi. So it's around the challenges that NWASCO faces regulating the sector in Zambia and what lessons they've learned through the digitization process and the M&E component, right? Like what their end is. Any other questions from the participants before I give James the floor to respond? Yes, Makate. Before
Shuko,
Chola, you come in. Yes, Chola.
yes, let me answer the one that was talking to the challenges that NWASCO has faced in regulating the sector. I must say that regulating is not an easy task. It's always evolving. So even the challenges, you always are faced with new challenges all the time. And just to highlight some of the challenges, maybe to bring them home to the discussion that we are having now, issue of data. So even as much as we have our NWASCO information system, you realize that we still do not have data to the extent that we would want to for us to be able to regulate effectively. In particular, I was hearing somebody asked about sanitation. Of course, we do have some data on sanitation, but there's still some gaps, particularly on issues of on-site sanitation. And what we've realized is that we need to undertake a baseline, a countrywide baseline, to basically establish what is on the ground for us to be able to inform our regulatory mechanisms. So one of the challenges is that we still have some gaps with regards to data in some aspects. I mentioned also earlier that we're getting into rural areas. That's an area where we need to basically think about how data is going to be coming in, because the setup in the rural areas is totally different from what we have in the urban. So that's another challenge. We are still thinking about how, what sort of system in terms of the collection of the data itself we are going to put up to be able to feed into the NWASCO information system. The other thing is that you cannot rule out the fact that utilities would want to paint a good picture. So if as a regulator, you do not have robust systems to actually check and verify and validate the data, the chances that you would have inaccurate data are very high. So even as we speak now with our NWASCO information system, web-based with all its qualities and functions, we still get confronted with situations where when you are analyzing the data, you realize that the trends are not making sense. And basically, these utilities are trying to paint a picture that is not what is on the ground. But also what we've learned is that it's not enough for the regulator to have a system alone. I think there is need to have a structured way of information management at the utility level for it to all work out. So again, we've realized that there are some capacity gaps in some utilities, both in terms of human capacity, but also in terms of systems and equipment to be able to have proper systems that can feed into our own system of data collection. The final challenge, and I must, like I said, these challenges are not conclusive because you're always confronted with new ones as you go. But the final one that I would want to mention is that we now have a situation where we have all sorts of mini systems, if I can call them that, which of course feed into the NWASCO information system, some of them, but not all of them. So we are now looking at how we can integrate the various little systems, even including what the utilities themselves have, to having one big robust system that can house everything. So that is another challenge, because if you have a system that does A, another system is doing B, and then you have a NWASCO information system that wants A and B together, it means that, and they are not integrated, they're not talking to each other. It means that you need to start entering data once or twice or three times for the same data, but pushing it into different systems. So that is another challenge. So what I would advise actually regulators that are trying to get into that is that they must take time to think about the data requirements involving all stakeholders so that once they come up with a system, it is all encompassing.
Obrigado.
James will answer the other questions.
Thank you, Chola. James, the other question was around lessons learned, in the digitizing process and the M&E component. And then we'll go to Makate's question. James?
Okay, thank you very much. So in terms of lessons learned, I think it's not lessons learned, but lessons that we keep on learning as NWASCO. Obviously, there is need now to possibly reduce or rather open up the reporting period from annually to maybe quarterly or even monthly if possible, to ensure that verifications are not only done at the end of the year, but they're also done monthly. Of course, the other bit that we've come to appreciate is that there is need for continued training of the end users, which in this case are the service providers. You would find that maybe because of change in personnel, you end up having reports that have so much error in them. So there is the need to continuously train or capacity build our staff at personnel at service provider level, and of course at NWASCO level as well. The biggest lesson of which I think we've also appreciated is the need to avoid having standalone digital platforms. This, I think, triggered the need to come up with the 𝐼MIS, which was presented in the PowerPoint presentation at ministry level, because we find ourselves having these different standalone systems. Now, what we would want is to have one that comprehensively captures information. This can be done not only at regulator level in terms of the NWASCO Information System, but even can go a step further in terms of the bidding systems, for example, that the service providers would have. If it's approached in such a way that we can have one, we can have a number of synergies that can be obtained from that. Similar also to aspects such as accounting systems. So all these, if they can be integrated into one, would have, I think, a reduction in the number of errors or missports that would face. There are many cases where the bidding system, for example, has got different figures, and the accounting system also has got different figures, but they are rating on similar indicators. So that reconciliation has to be done. So we keep on learning these lessons, and we keep on improving so that we can have a system that comprehensively addresses the needs of the sector. The second question, sorry, it was on monitoring and evaluation. If you could just kindly maybe repeat that question if possible.
Yeah, so the question was around the outputs of your M&E, what great. That looks like. Yeah.
Yes. So the overall outputs of our M&E of data, this data collection verification process is basically we have 9 key performance indicators that we report on as NWASCO. These indicators have got sector benchmarks that we require service providers to work towards attaining, with the understanding that once these benchmarks are met, we can have a more robust or better performing service provider, which in turn translates into a better performing sector. So the M&E data collection verification that we undertake is basically to appreciate how they are performing on those 9 indicators. Of course, among other areas of interest, but our sector report basically summarizes that into those 9 indicators as a final output of the monitoring and evaluation process. Thank you.
Thank you, James. So I will have Makate ask the question, and then after Makate's question, I will pivot to my colleague Barakat, who will read through some of the questions that we have in the chat. Makate?
Okay, thank you, Shuko, and thanks to the presenters for the information sharing. The question that I have now, I think one of the speakers, I think it's Chola, mentioned that the system is designed such that the information, if it's incorrect, the system doesn't accept it. We have a similar challenge here where, for an example, a municipality can load data, but we've got no way of measuring whether that is correct information or not. And I just wanted to know what type of information does the system reject, and how did they get around in terms of trying to get ensuring that that information that is presented to the regulator is factual. I'd just like to learn some lessons from them in terms of the data verification process that they implement on their side. Thank you so much, Chair.
Thank you, Makate, for that question. James Chola, just a response, and then Barakat, you could help us read through the questions in the chat.
Okay, thank you very much, Makate, for that. I think it's one thing collecting data; it's another ensuring that that data is accurate and complete to aid decision making. So the system has some inbuilt controls that check, for example, we have error checks as the first point of assessing accuracy or correctness. So in the event that a submission or an input column or row has not been inputted with the necessary information, for example, if you push in, as an example, a letter instead of a word in one row, it will give you an error check. Okay, so when that is submitted to us in that format, we can easily assess if there are any errors to begin with. If there are no errors, we can then move on to the next stage, which we basically look at the comparison. So one of the key controls that our system has also is a comparison mechanism. It is able to show information current year and previous year, and just by comparing the reported figures of certain indicators, you can tell that this year's submission seems quite off compared to last year. Maybe there's been a dramatic increase or a dramatic drop. So that again is a check for correctness, and it triggers us probing further and asking more questions to ensure that the information that's submitted is complete and correct. The other control check that we have is that our NWASCO Information System allows for the exporting of this information into an Excel sheet version. So once that is done, we are then able to scrutinize each indicator versus what we may have found during inspections, and also versus what we may have been obtaining through reports, for example, the water quality reports that we get, the management accounts that we get, the audited financial statements that we get. We can then be able to get information from those and compare with what has been submitted to us by these service providers. So those are some of the checks that the system has. Some of them are inbuilt, but it also has the component of exporting this information and allowing further verification and comparison up and above the system itself. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, James. So I'll be reading out some of the questions we have in the chat. We have a question from Inamaka, Punita, and Jonathan. So Inamaka has a question on, asking if the commercial utilities have access to the graphs and reports generated during the NWASCO retreat meeting to use on their end, or do they have to wait for the NWASCO annual report to be published? This is the first question from Inamaka. So I'll pause, James, for the response.
Okay, thank you very much. So the starting point is that the source of this information are the service providers themselves. What we are basically doing on our end is that we are restructuring it into the reporting format that we want as a regulator. So once that restructuring is done, we then verify and report them in the sector report. So this information is already sitting with the service provider. What we're simply doing is restructuring it, reporting it in a manner that we wanted to show in terms of format, and then bring in the aspect of comparison. Okay, then the graphs can then be shared through the annual sector report, which we published and is open for public viewing. So my end answer would be yes, they do have access to the information, but the graphs, that's basically simply digesting the information that they already have in the format that we want to see for the purpose of publication.
Okay. I see Inamaka raise a hand. Inamaka, do you want to clarify?
Yes. Hi, James. Thank you, Barakat. James, I'm asking because when we spoke to some of the Zambian stakeholders, at least one of them mentioned that, the NIS generates reports for them, which they can use. So I'm wondering at what point in time, because it wasn't really clear to me when Chola presented that diagram that shows the cycle of data from the CUs to the desk inspectors to the retreat meeting, like at what point do they actually get the graphs and the reports to use? Because it seems like it's something that they can get directly from the NIS after they have input their own data. It's already been analyzed by the system.
Okay, so maybe just to supplement the answer. So once they've submitted and once they input it and they submit to ourselves as the regulator, they can still be able to view that information, and they can actually export some information. But at that point, they cannot make any changes because now the information is sitting with us, and we are scrutinizing and we are reviewing it for the purpose of assessing accuracy. If in an event we find an error in the submission, we are not the ones who change it. We actually send it back to them. So when it is sent back, they are again able to have access to that system, and they can make changes and still be able to generate graphs again at that point. So perhaps that can help to supplement my answer. So before submission, they can change the data and they can view the graphs. Once they submit, they can view, but they cannot change until we send it back to the service providers.
All right, thank you so much. The second question is from Punita. Well, I think you've answered the question on whether the submission for review and approval are specific to water and sanitation KPIs. I think you've highlighted that, you responded to that from Engineer Femi's questions. So the other question from Punita is, she's asking if the system was custom built for NWASCO, or is it an off-the-shelf software?
Okay, thank you very much. So information has to be contextualized. Therefore, you have to build it according to what you want to see or what you want to use it for. And that was the same understanding that we had with the NWASCO Information System. So it was built and contextualized to meet the requirements of NWASCO and hence support or enhance our regulation by giving us the necessary information that we require. Thank you.
So Polita also posed another question saying that is the system providing analytics for decision making, or rather changing from manual submission to digital format to each submission? Is the goal to provide analytics for decision making, or just to change the formal process of data submission?
Okay, thank you very much. So Punita is highlighting two different sides of the system. The system is trying to address both of those sides. First and foremost, is trying to support the aspect of decision making by providing comprehensive and adequate decisions for relevant people to make decisions, but also it's was transformed from manual to digital just for ease of use and for quick generation of information. Okay, so the transition from manual to digital was to just help enhance the performance of the system and expand how much information we can get, which once analyzed and published can then support the aspect of decision making by the service providers and of course ourselves as the regulator and of course other sector players in the country. I hope that addresses the question.
All right, thank you so much, James. So lastly, the question from Jonathan is asking, can you show how the OSS KPI data is visualized? That's the on-site sanitation data.
Okay, so I mentioned earlier that on-site sanitation data, we capture septic tanks, filter trains, and any other form of on-site sanitation. But for the purpose of service coverage indicator reporting, we only capture septic tanks. So we capture a number of information which would, for example, septic tanks, we would want to know the population in a particular service area, would want to know how many households are using the septic tank, the population. Then we can arrive at the service coverage by appreciating those households that are on septic tanks versus total population. We then are now trying to move a step further in trying to break down this information into what can be categorized as safety managed, what can be categorized as basic, what can be categorized as limited. So we're trying to now go a step further and introduce aspect of the joint monitoring program ladders. So there's basically that. But what we want also is to not only focus the on-site sanitation bit on just the facility itself. We also want to report on the general chain itself, from the containment to the transportation to the treatment and disposal. So we actually have a chapter specific to on-site sanitation and fecal sludge management in our sector report, which is chapter 3, which tries to bring out all those key components. But for the purpose of reporting or visualizing the indicator, we are picking the number of septic tanks in an area. We are picking the number of filter trains in an area, how many of those are safely managed, and that now can be used to arrive at the sanitation coverage by comparing it to total population, and then we assess performance from there. So that's basically how we're trying to go about reporting.
All right, thank you so much, James. So I'll pass it to Shuku to take the other questions from the room. I saw someone raise his hand. Isaac. So, okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Barakat. I think we'll take the last question because I'm looking at the time. So we'll have Isaac ask his question, and then we'll move to the next session.
Yeah, hello to everyone. My name is Isaac. Sorry, I joined the conversation very late, but I think I have tried to have some understanding about the system and the functionality of the system. My concern has to do with integrating the system with other systems for data collection, the possibility of interoperability, is concerned. For example, in my country, we have a system we use, but it's been down for a very long time. So if you have a system that is user friendly, that can integrate with other application, my country if my institution now is looking forward to building a new system or data management system for WASH. So I will want to get some clear understanding of the functionality of the system, though you be answering some of the questions. So I would like if you can share a documentation with me about the full working of the system, then I can recommend this to my institution to see what we can move forward. Are you there?
Thank you, Isaac. Any reaction, James?
Thank you very much, Shuko. So the issue of data integration, I think we did discuss it previously, but yes, the NWASCO Information System does allow for integration with other systems, because what we want is to avoid having too many standalone systems. It's easier if we have one consolidated one, which is all encompassing and therefore easier to access data. For example, at the moment, we have this information system with the ministry. So that has been integrated to our NWASCO information system and is basically picking information from our system to the ministry level by selecting information that is relevant to the policymaker, which in this case is our ministry. So the aspect of data integration, definitely the system allows for that. In terms of availing documentation as to how the full system is working, of course, that can be done, I think, outside this meeting. The system has quite a number of components which we may not have addressed fully or appreciated fully during this presentation. But of course, that is something which can be arranged outside, and we can share more information that can help guide new Isaac in terms of what exactly we want to achieve. Thank you.
Thank you, James. And thank you, participants, for the amazing questions and the engagement. I will hand to Barakat for her to just give us some next steps before we wrap up. Barakat.
Yes. Please confirm you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
All right. Thank you so much. So I think at this point, we just talk about the next step from this conversation. The next step basically is staying connected to the public data system strengthening project. We have a number of activities going on, just as my colleague mentioned at the earlier start of this conversation. We have a landscaping exercise coming up. So it's a way to, gather all the lessons learned from different non-sewer sanitation data systems across sub-Saharan Africa. It's a course-learning activity, and by scanning this code here, you get to select which of the program you want to stay connected in, and then we'll share you information as they come along. You can also get access to learning materials and resources. We had shared the code on the learning materials for the NWASCO NIS, which we'll also do for every other sanitation data system too. We will be spotlighting during the course of our webinar. And also we have upcoming webinars that we will share with you to participate. We'll be spotlighting tools from different utilities, tools from regulators, just as we did today. We have utilities, we have those from, off-the-shelf, software programs that are being used across different countries in Africa. Yeah, so information about that will be communicated to you, but I'll just pause to give you time to scan this code so that you can, indicate which of these projects or programs you are interested in. And as you join today, you're part of a community, and definitely will continue to communicate any opportunities, any things you could join to support programs you could join to foster this goal that we're trying to push across different utilities and municipalities. So I think at this point, I don't want to take much of our time. We'll end on these notes, but I'll pass it to 𝐶hukwu for any, last minute remark.
Yeah, thanks, Barakat. Super exciting session, been really engaging. Thank you to the NWASCO team. Thank you, Chola. Thank you, James, for the amazing presentation. We have learned so much from your insights and from the demo that you had shared with us. And thank you to the participants for being really engaging and posting questions and asking questions. As Barakat mentioned, we have a lot more opportunities for us to continue engaging and for us to continue asking questions. We have a couple of webinar series that we'll be sharing with you soon. Look out for those emails. But if you have any questions pertaining to the public data systems for sanitation work that Dev-Afrique is doing, feel free to reach out to the email that is currently showing on your screen. And I have been your host, 𝐏𝐿 𝐒𝐿, super excited, and thank you all, and we'll talk soon. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.